Hello and welcome to the News9 Plus show on the world's first news and current affairs OTT platform, News9 Plus. UK's Prime Minister Rishi Sunak called a snap general election to be held on the 4th of July. In a statement from Downing Street, Sunak said he spoke to King Charles earlier that day to request the dissolution of Parliament for a general election. Now, since he became the Prime Minister less than 2 years back, Sunak has managed to steady the economy, but he hasn't been able to boost the Conservatives' popularity with the public. Added to that is the global cost of living crisis. As he heads into the election, we are asking, can Rishi Sunak win? To discuss this, let me start by introducing my guests for the show. Joining me to discuss this are Ambassador YK Sinha, former Indian High Commissioner to the UK, Indrani Bagchi, CEO Ananta Aspen Centre, Dr. Neeraj Patil, who joins us from the UK. He's the chairman of Hindus for Labour, and of course my colleague R. Sridharan here in the News9 Plus studio. Welcome to the News9 Plus show. I want to start by asking Indrani this. Indrani, the picture of Rishi Sunak standing outside 10 Downing Street in the pouring rain reminded me of Sharad Pawar about 5 years back doing the same thing in Maharashtra when he had his back to the wall. He addressed that rally in Maharashtra, in the pouring rain. He was rewarded for it. Will this work for Rishi Sunak?
One doesn't know. The chips are almost all stacked against him and the Tories. He could have had an autumn election, which was what was planned. He went on a gamble. This is nothing short of a gamble. And I think he gambled on the fact that inflation figures came down to 2.3% yesterday morning. But the party is demoralized. The party has been losing local elections. Labour is enthused. And things haven't been going well for the Tories for some time. So one doesn't know whether this is a gamble that will pay off, or will it be the inevitable? Will it be a debate about how much will he lose by?
Is it going to be a debate about how much he'll lose by? Sri, you have been tracking Rishi Sunak very closely over the last 2 years. Tell us what he's up against. And how did a Indian origin Prime Minister, of course, that's one of the main reasons we are looking at Rishi Sunak so closely. How did he lose the plot in the last 2 years? Why is he so unpopular?
Well, I don't think it's fair to pin the blame entirely on Rishi Sunak, Sandeep, because he's been in power only for 2 years. But the fact that the Conservatives haven't had a really good handle on the Prime Minister leadership issue, within the party, and the fact that the global economic conditions weren't really good. We had inflation going up. UK was in technical recession. The second half of 2023, it's just come out of it. Interest rates were very high. Inflation was high. So I guess there are a lot of factors which also added to the, let's say, people's disaffection with the Conservative Party. So I guess these are all the reason why he's obviously chosen to call for an early election. Otherwise, it shouldn't have happened until the end of this year. Is that he sees that this is probably the best chance for Conservative to make some sort of a claim in front of people and say, okay, we can fix the problems that you've been facing. And one thing he's been consistently saying against Labour Party is that they don't have a clear plan in terms of how they want to fix the economy. So, to be fair to him, we haven't really heard much from Keir Starmer by way of the actual details. Well, there are broader points that he's come up with. I'm sure they'll be working out the details. But as of now, I think there is some case that Rishi Sunak can make, saying that they don't have a clear plan, but I have. Vote for me. But whether that actually translates into votes and whether he wins, I don't think at this point there is any indication that Rishi Sunak or the Tories are going to come back to power.
All right. Doesn't look like the Tories are coming back to power. Ambassador Sinha, you've been in the UK for many years. You've looked at the politics there very closely. How did the Conservatives so completely lose the plot? Was it a combination of the global factors, as Sri was mentioning? Is it to do with the fact that they've not had a really charismatic leader, of the kind that they had in the past? Like everyone looks towards Margaret Thatcher. What is the problem really? And what is it that Rishi Sunak is really fighting now?
I think it's a combination of factors, as the previous speakers have mentioned. But I think what is important to realize is that in the last 8 years,
Yes.
the Tories have had 4 prime ministers.
Right.
They've gone through, if I could call it, the misery of Brexit.
Yes.
On the 23rd of June 2016, they voted for Brexit.
Yes.
And on the 31st of January 2020, they were out of the EU. And that had severe economic consequences. I think people are appreciating it now. They've just emerged from shallow recession, a growth of 0.6%, and as Indrani mentioned,
yes.
inflation 0.3%.
Right.
But that's just a drop in the water, really. Some clinging on to straws, I would think.
Right.
As far as Mr. Sunak is concerned, he's a very bright politician who is actually with a very difficult job. In many ways, he was the fall guy of the Tories, because if you remember his predecessors, particularly Liz Truss, had actually really cleared the pitch for the Tories. And Boris Johnson before that, despite being a charismatic leader, unfortunately, especially during COVID, attracted a lot of criticism. So I think the economy in one hand, the handling of COVID to some extent, and of course, anti-incumbency, 14 years in power, and having changed so many captains midway. So I think obviously all this counts. And if you look at their record, the last elections, they won 365 seats.
Yes.
And for that, a snap election by Theresa May, and actually they had reduced their majority from 330 to 314. So I think the Labour Party itself is organized much better now under Starmer. Under his predecessor, of course, there was a lot of disaffection and there were problems. But I think the Labour Party has got its act together, and they're putting a serious challenge to the Tories. So obviously, Mr. Sunak has a very tough task ahead of him.
Rishi Sunak has a tough task ahead of him, as Ambassador Sinha mentioned, and I want to come to Dr. Patil, who's joining us from the UK. Dr. Patil, I must ask you this: Ab ki baar Starmer Sarkar, is this going to be all set? Is Labour all set to take over?
Yes, so 100%. I wouldn't even say 99%. I would say 100%. It's going to be a Labour government.
Right.
But we must, as a British Indian, I also celebrate the fact that we had a first black ethnic minority prime minister of Britain, and Rishi Sunak as a prime minister, I think he did a decent job.
Right.
And the challenge for him is, whether he will lose by a few runs or whether he loses by an innings defeat.
Right.
That's the challenge.
Oh, okay. Right. I think innings defeat or a couple of runs. But Sri, this calling for early elections reminds me of the India shining moment of the NDA 20 years back. Where the NDA actually believed it was on a winning wicket and it called for early elections.
True.
And, the results are known to us, and it's the Indians who are left standing in the sun for the summer elections. I think it's the first time the UK has called for such early elections.
That's
first time
true.
Since 1945. But he's gone out on a limb and a prayer with that very narrow margin of the inflation figures, actually, that he hopes that will kind of, get him through. But tell us about the other policies that he's really followed. If you look at him from an Indian perspective, if you were the parent of an Indian student wanting to study in the UK, Rishi Sunak wouldn't be the best, Indian origin prime minister.
True.
He tried to abolish that thing.
I mean, his stance on immigration has been controversial.
Yes.
The biggest being the move to send refugees to Rwanda, to ship them out to Rwanda, pay Rwanda money and get them to keep them.
Right.
But I think, as far as, Neeraj Patil talked about Keir Starmer.
Yes.
I mean, Keir Starmer is an interesting person. If you look at him, he was really a leftist when he began his career.
Yes.
He's a lawyer by, education. People say he's methodical, but as lawyers go, he's also a little, not as flamboyant as, let's say, Rishi Sunak, handsome young man, investment banker. But I think what he now brings to the table is a promise to end what he calls the Tory chaos of 14 years.
Yes.
So I think that's the promise, and that message, and elections are all about messaging,
Absolutely.
Sandeep.
Yes.
So I think that one line seems to be resonating with, the British people. And I think that itself may be enough to give the Labour Party some sort of an edge. The real economic issues, whether Labour can come in and fix it, is like anyone's guess, because the best forecast for the UK economic growth is 2% in the long term. So it's not going to, like, any party is going to come and suddenly whip up the growth to 5-6%. That's not going to happen. But it's a question of, can you keep inflation down? Can you keep interest rates down? I mean, that's the stability which the Aam Aadmi of UK expects from a government. And I think if let's say the Labour Party is able to do that, then I think they'll be in.
It looks like it's Labour from all accounts. But Indrani, I must ask you this. For the last 3 or 4 years, there's been talk of this India-UK trade deal, and it was almost like a QED that after Brexit, India would be the preferred trade partner for the UK. What has really held this up in the last few years? And do you think that if there is a Labour government, Keir Starmer, would they push for this India-UK trade deal the way the Conservatives did in the last few years?
Probably not. And I think there has been a lot of effort, certainly between India and the UK, to complete this agreement before the Conservatives give up power, because I think the writing has been on the wall for some time. It's been held up for a number of actually very few reasons, but it's not done until it's done. So I think we just have to give up on this, because with a Labour government, the emphasis will be different, the priorities will be different. So we, in many ways, have to start from scratch, unless between now and the 4th of July, somehow both countries can head to the finish line.
Literally, given the fact that we are in election mode as well, Sri, and that seems very unlikely.
Well, unlikely, because both Rishi Sunak is clearly in the election mode, and is the whole country is in election mode already.
India
July,
election
4th
mode
is not far away at all. So I don't think it's going to happen at all.
But the interesting thing here, Sri, is the choice of 4th of July. Isn't that US Independence Day, when the US declared independence from the UK? Why did you choose the 4th of July?
So one theory for that is, of course, the economic part, but the other theory is that don't forget that the US is going to election later this year. I mean, November we'll get to know.
Everybody is in election mode this year.
So I think there is some sort of pact between US and UK that both the countries should not be facing elections at the same time. So that's one of the theories why.
That's interesting. Because so Atlantic cousins kind of stagger the elections.
It's not strategically advisable for the two countries to be caught up with their own internal issues at the same time.
Not to mention Russia.
And when there's so much happening.
Russia on their doorstep.
Russia, plus there's so much happening in the Middle East. So I think there was some sort of maybe that also played a role. Although I would err on the side of like the economic, the upswing which. A mild upswing which Britain is witnessing on the
inflation
growth.
is down.
Exactly. I think
2%.
From a political point of view, I think that probably was a bigger driver of the decision to go for a snap election July 4th.
4th of
but
July.
That could have also been a factor.
That's right. Interesting point of view there. But ambassadors, now what do we know about Labour? I mean, Indrani just kind of pricked the balloon there when she said there's not going to be an India-UK trade deal. What do we know about Labour's attitude towards India, and what can we expect from Keir Starmer? How have you've seen him closely? What's your assessment of him, Keir Starmer Prime Ministership?
Before I answer your question, may I just address 2 points quickly? One, immigration issue. I think what we must, as Indians, Indian students, parents of Indian students and Indian students themselves, be very mindful of is the attempt to scrap the 2-year post-study visa. That, in my opinion, a retrograde step. Because the UK would be losing a lot of money. They earn about over £25 billion from international students. And Indians are going to be the most affected. So I hope policy doesn't go through. And the second point on the India-UK trade deal. While the Conservatives really pushed it, I think the Labour Party will not abandon it simply because it will be good for them, because if a trade deal that is a mutually win-win situation, and I hope that's what happens, then it boosts UK exports into India, which are actually lagging behind because we have a favourable balance of trade. But having said that, of course, till the last screws turn until the last sort of I is dotted. We really won't know whether we will have a trade deal before 4th of July. And if we don't, then hopefully we might have a good deal after. But as far as the Labour attitude and the question that you asked, I think the Labour attitude towards India has been, actually it's very surprising. It's not very surprising because constituency pressure, we know what constituency pressure has. Labour has been taking a very, I would say even an anti-India stand on issues of more importance to us in the past. And remember, I go hard back to Robin Cook, where Queen Elizabeth was, Her Majesty Queen Elizabeth was coming to India. They stayed on Kashmir, really, where you had David Miliband talking in the similar vein. And then Jeremy Corbyn, he in fact was influenced by a large number of people from Pakistan-occupied Kashmir, Mirpur in particular, and Pakistan, and their positions, their resolutions, not favorably inclined towards India on one hand, and then you had members of parliament who were hardline Sikhs, who were espousing, if not espousing, at least sympathetic to the separatist cause. So I think we would need to be very careful. I think Sir Keir Starmer is obviously done a very good swing back to a position which we would be more comfortable with. But I think time will tell when Labour is in power, because don't forget that there is a certain area in the Midlands and Birmingham, Manchester, etc., which actually, I don't have the exact figure. In my time, there were 11 members of parliament representing that constituency I referred to, and calling or influencing Labour Party opinions and views on the subcontinent. So I think we will have to be careful, very watchful, and see how things emerge. I do hope that we will have a very productive relationship, and people like Judge will help us in achieving that.
I'm going to ask that question to Dr. Patil. Since you're a member of the Labour Party, Dr. Patil, what can India expect from a Labour government, a Keir Starmer government? As Ambassador Sinha was saying, Labour has not been too friendly in the past.
See, let me clarify. It's a two-way process. So the thing is, I chair Hindus for Labour, and why Labour Party started as Hindus for Labour was in 2019, during the tenure of Jeremy Corbyn, the Labour Party policy shifted, was anti-India, and so then a motion was passed at the Labour Party conference that led to a lot of Hindus quitting the Labour Party. Now, the current Labour administration want Hindus and Muslims together in the Labour Party. So, and Labour Party wants good bilateral relations between India and Pakistan. And that's the key thing. So, I hope the Indian administration that takes takes power on 5th of June, emphasizes that, the good, emphasizes on good bilateral relations between India and Pakistan. Not only that, also good, relations between various religious communities in India as well. It is very, very important.
Absolutely. Peace and harmony. But thanks for your observations, Dr. Patil. But Sri, you have a point there.
So, one thing we should remember is that while Keir Starmer did, earn his spurs under Jeremy Corbyn, the fact that he moved the party away from ultra-left to more towards centre. Now, that's something which, even some people in the Labour Party are not happy with. They think that he's abandoning our, ultra-left stance. But I think we can expect a very pragmatic, approach from Keir Starmer, because ultimately he's a lawyer. He's going to be fairly balanced in terms of the approach, and that's already, in many occasions he's already displayed that. And to Dr. Patil's point, he even went and inaugurated the statue of Lord Basaveshwara, a renowned sage from Karnataka, which, even our Prime Minister went and unveiled it at Dr. Patil's invitation. So I think he will display a lot of pragmatism, and India is now at a point where, it's a counterbalance to a lot, China.
That's right.
So, in terms of India being an economic sweet spot, and being strategically important for the Western world, I don't think Keir Starmer is going to forget that.
Yes.
So that will pretty much be, the center point of their engagement with India.
The Five Eyes strategy.
Absolutely. So I think he will adopt a very pragmatic approach.
He'll be a pragmatic Prime Minister. And but going back to Rishi Sunak, who's literally fighting with his back to the wall, what do you think his mother-in-law would advise him, given the fact that she's also in Parliament now, in the Rajya Sabha? Sudha Murthy.
Well, I wish I could read Sudha Murthy's mind, but I know that Mrs. Murthy is a very, very smart, accomplished woman. And I guess she'll probably just advise him, take the public's decision with grace, whatever it is.
Absolutely.
Yeah, that's the, ethos of a democracy.
Absolutely. And he'll live on to fight another day because he's really young and he's a long way to go. But thank you very much for that great discussion. Indrani Bagchi, Ambassador Sinha, Dr. Patil and my colleague Sridhar Ramakrishnan. Rishi Sunak, can he win? We'll know in July. New Delhi has submitted an application to the International Seabed Authority to explore the seabed in the Indian Ocean. Now, India had applied for the license in January and a decision is expected by the end of this year. Why does India want to explore the Indian Ocean seabed, and which are the other countries in this race? Joining me to discuss this is Commander Arnab Das, Director of the Maritime Research Centre. Commander Das, welcome to the News9 Plus show.
Thank you for having me here.
Why is India involved in a race to the seabed?
There are multiple factors. First of all, definitely the resources that are available. I mean, whether it is energy security or various other, from the strategic security perspective also, we need to build those capabilities to be able to, maintain our presence in the underwater.
Right.
6 times more resources for the EV is available in the deep oceans.
Right.
So definitely
electric vehicles.
Yes. And also, the polymetallic nodules. From an energy security perspective, there are methane and so many other things that are available. And Government of India is definitely focusing in the Indian Ocean region now.
Yes.
Because we have not explored it so much earlier, but now there is so much to be done. So definitely there's a very focused approach towards it.
So, I've been hearing about polymetallic nodules ever since I was in school, Commander Das. And, I know the fact that they are potato-sized lumps of minerals that are found on the seabed at depths between 4 and 6 kilometers.
Yes.
Explain to our viewers the complexity of getting those nodules from the seabed. I would argue of developing something like a vacuum cleaner and running it on the seabed and sucking it up and using the minerals. But tell us why it's not as easy as it sounds.
There are 2 parts to it. One is the exploration and the second is the exploitation.
Right.
So, as you know, the tropical waters.
Yes. Which is the Indian Ocean, the warmer waters.
Also,
yes.
The tropical waters, the warm waters as we call it, the sonars that are used, sonars were typically designed and developed during the Cold War period for the Greenland, Iceland, UK gap.
Yes.
Those are the temperate and the polar region.
Right.
The same sonar, when you bring it here, gives you 60% degraded performance.
Yes.
So right from an exploration perspective itself, there's a massive challenge that, to be able to find. The second aspect is the viability of such an activity.
Right.
Experts say that if you do not have enough resources to be able to exploit it for at least 15 to 20 years, it's not economically viable.
Right. By viability, you mean that your return on investment should be higher.
Yes, return on investment. Because when you set up this whole thing, it's a serious issue.
Right. How many billions of dollars are we talking of here? How much would it?
I don't want to guess a number.
Right. But it would be in the billions.
It will be a very massive number.
And it would be. Is it more complicated than oil exploration or digging for oil?
Far more.
Right. And why is that the case?
Because as you mentioned, breaking it up into smaller parts. What people are looking at is because you have to bring it out and in large numbers.
Right.
So what they are looking at it is crushing it into into smaller parts and making a sludge which can be sucked up.
Right.
So that itself, will require a different way of working.
So the difference between oil exploration and polymetallic nodules is that the nodules are small, but they're scattered on the seabed.
Yes.
Whereas oil, you just hit that thing and you can pump out the oil.
Pump it out.
Right.
So they are, for both, rare earth metals and this, they are looking at it to be pulled out.
Right.
So that requires a very different capability.
Yes.
Then also there is now a concern. International Seabed Authority is also fighting an issue of environmental sustainability.
Yes.
So unless that is established, and there are certain countries, which are opposing this. When people who missed the bus in the beginning in terms of this whole seabed mining requirement.
So why are those countries opposing the seabed mining? Is
because
it because
they were not part of the initial thing. Now, they want to, make sure that others also don't get it. So they are opposing, from, you have messed up the earth enough now.
Yes, and now you're going to the
mess
seabed.
up the waters. And because it will be very difficult to, because see, in land, it remains contained in a smaller area. But in the oceans, it will spread. And it will be very difficult. The damage will be far more
widespread.
So it will be extremely difficult to ensure. And when we look at environment impact assessment, there are multiple dimensions to it. I mean, one is, which is not very much well known, is the acoustic habitat degradation. Because underwater, speed of sound is 5 times faster. So, and the underwater creatures, I mean, largely the marine mammals and such creatures are dependent on sound for biologically critical functions. So if you create a lot of noise because of these human activities, it will cause a serious environmental damage. So that's something we need to factor. So even the whole environment impact assessment has to be looked at it from a very different dimension.
Absolutely. But Commander Das, also the fact that let's talk about the dragon in the room. And China has been very actively scouring the Indian Ocean region. They've been sending these surveillance ships, spy ships, oceanographic survey vessels. Tell us about the missions of these ships. I mean, are they there, apart from the missile test, we know that, but are they also there for extracting resources from the seabed?
Absolutely. I mean, that's what I've been talking about when I say underwater domain awareness. The pooling of resources and synergizing of efforts is something we need to look at very seriously, because these are very high stake and high resource intensive initiatives. So unless all the 4 stakeholders, whether it is strategic security, blue economy, sustainability and environment, sustainability and climate change, and the digital or the science and technology effort, unless all of them come together, it won't make sense, or it will not be optimum enough.
All the stakeholders
need to come together. So China is trying to do that. See, even mapping the underwater space, for AUV development, we need very high quality and high resolution images, or high charts, and China is doing that. So whether it will be used for deploying AUVs to find resources, or for strategic security deployment, once the country has the data, it's their
dual
asset.
Use technology.
It is certainly dual use. Anything underwater is dual use.
Data is also dual use. But my last question to you, Commander Das, is that what would you expect from the new government? The seabed, the underwater domain has not been a very high priority region for the government, but given the factors that you just explained to us, the fact that China is also involved in this race in our backyard, what would you want the new government to do in terms of policy, in terms of bringing all these multiple stakeholders together?
See, I want to highlight Honorable Prime Minister, moment he came to power, way back in May 2015, he announced the Sagar Vision.
Sagar Vision,
What is Sagar Vision? I mean, security and growth for all in the region. So both security and economy or economic growth has been put on the same priority level, number one. And secondly, he also talked about leadership role for India in the region. So you can only look at leadership role if you have the capacity and capability. And if you can support the other nations in the region in terms of their capacity and capability building. And every time, whether Prime Minister has spoken at the UN, or every time he has repeated this priority of the oceans, and even in the G20 declaration also, they have used the word ocean economy. They have not used the word blue economy. The blue economy policy is almost ready, as I understand. In the last 3 years, they have debated the draft blue economy policy. So the government is definitely looking at it, but being given the size of our country and the various factors, priorities, we need to. But my submission to the government, I mean the next government which is going to be coming soon, would be that capacity capability building should be the highest priority. Making a declaration is one aspect, but to be able to make sure that we achieve that, and the kind of underlying capacity and capability, and particularly when we say underwater, acoustic capacity capability building is the key. I mean, even under the MDA, Maritime Domain Awareness, the underwater part is completely not seen.
Absolutely.
So
the underwater
we need
part
to
is not
focus.
seen. But thank you very much, Commander Das, for alerting us about this, the fact that we need to build up capability and capacity in the underwater domain for the reasons that you mentioned. The Nifty has hit a record high. It's 22,800 as of today. The Sensex is up 600 points. This pre-election rally that has propelled the stock market to record market capitalization of $5 trillion is not enough, says Prime Minister Modi. In an interview to Business Daily, he said, I can say with confidence that on the 4th of June, as the BJP hits record numbers, the stock market will also hit new record highs. So is the market bullish on Prime Minister Modi? Talking about this, I have with me here Mr. Amit Kumar Gupta, founder FinTrek Capital, and my colleague Suyash Maheshwari in the studio at News9 Plus. Welcome to the News9 Plus show. Mr. Gupta, I want to just read out these facts. Gold is at an all-time high, real estate is at an all-time high, stocks are at an all-time high. All asset classes are booming. Has this happened before, or is this the first time you're seeing this kind of rally?
It has happened before also. In the last part of the 2008 rally,
right.
We also saw similar patterns. Even briefly in 2020, after the COVID stimulus was there,
right.
We again saw till 2021 October, November that all the asset classes were rallying together.
Right.
It has happened before also.
Yes.
Though the reasons for every time the rally happens could differ.
Right. It could differ at some point. But how, Suyash, you've been looking at the markets very closely. How, linked is this with the prospects of the government coming to power? A second term.
It's actually very much linked with how and when what the final tally is going to look like, Sandeep. First of all, thank you for having me on the show. I think elections overall are one of the most volatile times for the stock markets, because this, after all, brings uncertainty into the system. Because elections, after all, is a binary event. Whether the incumbent government will come back to power or not. I think in the context of our country, it's not as much a question of whether they will come back to power or what the final tally is going to look like.
The numbers.
The numbers. So back in December, after BJP's thumping victory in the assembly elections, the market participants and the community alike, they were expecting, they were factoring in a strong 400 plus seat win for the BJP government. But as we got closer to the elections, that expectation of a 400 plus final tally got thinner and thinner. Just on April 9th, for instance, since April 9th actually, just 10 days before polling began in India for the 2024 elections, Nifty has in that, in the month and a half, has risen 1,000 points, fallen 1,000 points, risen 1,000 points again, and again we are back at all-time high levels. So what has happened in that time frame? Again, BJP and actually the market participants were factoring in a very strong victory for the BJP government of 400 plus, but then as the expectations got this slighter and slighter, got compressed, the market started recalibrating itself. So since the start of May, after that first few phases of election, because of the lower voter turnout, the market overall was disappointing. They recalibrated that number to about 350 to 340 for the NDA government on the whole. But in the second phase of elections, as more and more northern states started going to polls and the voter turnout significantly improved, not to mention the assurance given by the Prime Minister, Mr. Amit Shah and Mr. Jai Shankar, that the markets are going to rally and they are also expecting a big victory for their government. The markets have once again started on their bull run, and we have made a record high today. Nifty is very close to 23,000 mark, just about 7 points shy of it actually. Sensex is back above 75,000 day, but overall the markets are going to be very volatile in the next couple of weeks.
Overall the markets are going to be very volatile, but Mr. Gupta, does India Inc. really care if the numbers are 272 or if it's 400 plus? Just as long as the government comes back to power, isn't that enough? I mean, because the government seems to have done pretty well with 270, 282 and then later to 303. So how much of an impact do these numbers really make for the markets?
Not much. I think these are more for discussion purposes and speculation purposes just before the elections. Once the elections are over, the contours of the new governments are in place in June. The focus will clearly shift to the presentation of a full budget in July. Along with that, how the taxation changes, if it happens. the current government has been very vocal about the need for a estate duty or inheritance tax.
Right.
So there has been always a fear factor in all the budgets in the last 6 years.
Right.
They have also defended long-term capital gains and dividend tax.
Yes.
So as a result, in the past decade, since 2014, the effective personal taxation rates have always remained high, and the direct tax code is expected to remove even more exemptions in the coming years.
Right.
So I think the markets may feel a little euphoric going into the elections, and if the number comes in majority, whether it is 272 or whether it is more than 300,
right.
We might see a euphoric move up, then a corrective move down, as the budget may not enthuse the market participants, and earnings sort of fail to justify some of the lofty valuations currently. Even in the current earnings season, what we are seeing is that there are more downgrades than upgrades.
Yes.
Almost 60% of the companies in Nifty 500 have been downgraded. So we are not trading very cheap going into the elections. I think the pre-election rally has already happened.
Yes.
And the earnings which will come may not justify some of the very expensive valuations we have. So we could have a period of consolidation in the next 1.5 months.
We could have.
Budget is up.
Before I come to Suyash, I'm going to ask you these 5 expectations that you would have from the new government, whichever government comes to power after the 4th of June. 5 expectations.
So see, I think, in general, I have always held the view that, most of the governments, whether it has been the Congress government with the UPA 1 and the UPA 2 between 2004 and 2014, or whether it has been the NDA government between 2014 and 2024. All of them have, the pace and the direction of the economic growth has always been, towards the growth agenda and towards the populist agenda. And I don't think that will change very materially. Some of the good things which have been done in the NDA 1 and 2, like the PLI schemes or the defense opportunities which have opened up, I expect them, to sort of go on and not make any changes. There could be changes in how some of the schemes getting merged or optimizing at the state and the center levels. But I don't see anything, anything major happening where the fiscal will be disturbed. In fact, the dividend which RBI has declared, that has sort of eased out the fiscal deficit path for the next couple of years as well. So as of now, I have not many extraordinary expectations from the new government. I just feel that the existing policy will continue, but I will be a little skeptical on the taxation part. How that sort of evolves over the next sort of one year.
Right, absolutely. But Suyash, what if there was an upset, a surprise on the 4th of June? How would the markets react to that?
Yes, I think Mr. Gupta presents a contrarian sort of view. I think a more popular narrative that, at least from what I am hearing, talking to experts day in, day out, is that there will be a big impact in the market if there is outsized win or a loss for the BJP government. Let's say in scenario 1, BJP and NDA government is not able to rake in more than 300 seats. The market will see a 5 to 10% fall. The upside is not as much. If there is a 400 plus sort of a victory, which the market had, remember, previously anticipated, we won't see that outside sort of an impact that would come if there is a major disappointment overall. But just to add to that, there are other multiple factors at play that the market, because of which the markets have rallied, because India overall has found itself in a Goldilocks sort of a situation. Overall, our economy is doing superbly well. GDP growth has been rather strong in the first 2 quarters of this calendar year, and also inflation is coming off nicely, whereas in other countries, you look at China, their market has, because of the property crisis going on over there, has been moving pretty much sideways or in the negative trajectory for the past 2 years. As Mr. Gupta also pointed out, we are currently commanding a premium for example, the price to earnings on Indian markets is currently at about 25. PE is 25, whereas China is currently valued at 10. So we are at 2.5 times, or more than that, expensive than Chinese market. But there is a reason to it, because economy is doing well, inflation is coming, off
fastest
nicely.
growing major economy in the world.
Definitely, sir.
Yeah, right. So that's one big reason for the markets to be really optimistic, bullish on Modi. You just heard it from our experts here on the News 9 Plus show. Thank you for joining us, Mr. Gupta, and my colleague Suyash Maheshwari.